Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here and Brian over there. Brian, how are we doing this week?
Pretty good. I mean, it feels like we haven't recorded in a veritable eternity.
Yeah.
What with the scheduling and whatnot on our end.
Yeah, we did not record last week, and we had put one in the can early because of your card playing activities. How did you fare at the tournaments last weekend?
So I got to 4-1, and it's like a 6-round tournament, and normally you can draw the last round. That means like 4 wins and 1 loss. And then,
that's where your loss came from, you're saying?
No, but so like 4-1-1 is typically you want to go 4-1 and draw the last round, but the tiebreakers worked out that I could not. I was like the worst of the 4-1s, and so I had to play, and unfortunately I lost to this dude playing goblins.
Does that mean that you lost ultimately in the finals, or that means you lost in the first playoff round?
Yeah, well, I lost in the Swiss round, so I didn't make it to the top 8 elimination. I ended up getting like 10th place. Although doing that kind of thing, there was this option to like cross my fingers and draw and hope that the tiebreakers work out. Although it seems like they probably weren't going to. So what you want to do is play for your destiny and then just work on playing in high pressure situations. And there's ways in which you can maybe play better. One thing I do in Magic the Gathering is I don't split anymore, is what I've decided to do, which is, you could like chop up the top 8, wherein, I mean, that top 8 was probably like $1,400 or $1,500 in credit. And so maybe people agree to split it among the top 8s evenly rather than, having first place get the lion's share and whatnot. But what you got to do is play in those those money matches that are worth a lot of money so you can get used to winning them so that you can get more first place tallies. And that's kind of what you have to do to be a good player.
Yep. I, too, prefer to have, if the game is on the line, let me have the puck on my stick and not have to, be on the bench hoping for someone else to, to score the winning goal. But I suppose everyone thinks that. Well,
there's a feeling of camaraderie in doing the split or whatnot. Or it's fun to to take the pressure off, but you have to in the fiery crucible of pressure is how you better yourself.
All right, well that's pretty good. Let me ask you: did your phone explode yesterday with an emergency warning about an active shooter?
It sure did.
Yeah, we had a couple of those yesterday here in Maine. One of them, that was not too far from where I live. Apparently caused everyone's phone to go off across 2 states with one of those emergency alerts where there's a big doo. Usually that's reserved for like a flash flood or a tornado in your area or something like that. But this time we got it. But it was like apparently some minor road rage incident. Some dude shot another dude down up in Wyndham, I guess, in traffic there on 302 out in front of the Walmart, is what I understand. But man, I do feel like these emergency alerts, they should not, if you are, for me being so close, it made sense to receive an emergency alert, maybe, but I mean, people way out in eastern Maine and across the border of New Hampshire are getting this alert too. I mean, I worry we're going to a place where like everything is an alert, right? And if everything is alert, nothing is an alert. But I don't know. I think that I may be the only person who is grousing about this, but I'm very persnickety about notifications on my phone. Each of my Google Android operating system allows you to alter your notifications via sound and like actual pop-up message, depending on your contacts. And so I just have everything on lockdown. I'm very, very careful about which notifications I allow to disturb my consciousness. And so I really don't like having control of my phone taken from me, and now it's going to blast this obnoxious noise. So I don't know. It should definitely be like a safety thing. I don't know. What did you think, Brian? Was any part of you irked by receiving this, having your phone blow up at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock yesterday, whenever that was?
It was loud and cacophonous. I saw in the main subreddit or whatever, people were complaining about getting it like way up north and whatnot.
Hours and hours away by car. Like I don't think. Yeah.
I guess I wasn't. I didn't really give it any thought once I just, turned off the notification. So I guess I wasn't hugely bothered by it. I suppose if there was like a big. I think it's probably unclear when the shooting's happening. If it's something's going down like in Lewiston, or if it's more of like a. Well, I guess one person getting gunned down is a big deal if you're the dude getting gunned down.
Yeah, well, right. Ideally, no. Right. Of course, it'd be horrible. But we're talking about just the notifications and the aftermath. The man is already lying bleeding on the pavement right now. What are we going to do to everyone's phones in the area? Apparently, is what emergency, first responders were thinking. And I don't know.
Well, I imagine they just didn't know the full extent of what was going on when they sent it.
Maybe you're right, and they were trying to act in abundance of caution. But boy, I sure hate that. After the COVID era, the phrase "abundance of caution" is just, like, that just gives cover to all manner of crimes.
Well, how many people should be gunned down before they send out a warning, in your estimation?
Well, maybe we just restrict it to your county and adjacent counties or something like that. Same with flash floods. Maybe we do that instead of having multiple states. I don't know. I can tell just by your reaction, though, that it's my peccadillos here, and not and everyone else would prefer to have their phones blown up with safety messages.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't need to be the whole state. That's certainly well, maybe. I mean, is there a threshold of people being gunned down where notifying the whole state might make sense?
No, for a single. Obviously not. Like, for a single shooter, no, obviously, like, an entire state doesn't need an emergency alert.
Well, what about like the Lewiston situation?
Yeah, so I would think that, like, so is right? Remember, the gunman was, like, at large, right, after the Lewiston situation. So now that's something where, maybe like with a flash flood or a tornado, you hit your county and adjacent counties with the alert at that stage. But with what happened in Lewiston 2 years ago, I understand why the first responders don't want to be the one to make the call to not to be. But look, we just the voice of, like, hey guys, we're just going to have to be risk tolerant a little bit. That's just part of living in society. We need that voice needs to be a little louder, and the abundance of caution voice, I feel like we're way too far on the abundance of caution side to where we're into where it gets ridiculous sometimes. But
well, we certainly like a risk tolerance is like not the virtue of our society, huh?
It'd be nice if we could embrace a little bit more of that. But I suppose that's a broader discussion for a reminiscence of the COVID era, in which risk tolerance was just not part of the equation whatsoever. I did have a chance, finally, by the way, Brian, to listen to that Kurt Metzger appearance on the Duncan Trussell Family Hour that you recommended in, like, June. I can't remember when it dropped exactly. And that was a pretty good episode. Everyone, if you've not had a chance to go back and check it out, Kurt Metzger just brings the high energy. Just he's one of these, like, Alex Jones types, just screaming crazy stuff out. Makes for an entertaining hour of listening. But the one thing that really caught my attention was, and I'd not heard this before, when they talked about just to rewind the tape a little bit, you had brought up the Gifted and Talented program, of which you and I were part in our elementary school days. And the Gifted and Talented program was a big theme of this particular podcast. And the thing that they mentioned that was weird to me was the idea of this pink drink, because that sounded incredibly familiar to me. I can picture it in my hand in a white styrofoam cup, like this pink drink. And I can't remember. I think it was in Mrs. Hall's first grade room, my home room, where I had this pink drink. But I might be mixing it up with the Swish, because we did the Swish a lot too in first grade. Yeah, the fluoride Swish.
Yeah.
So it's just a really weird, hazy memory. Could just be a coincidence. It could just be a fragment or an artifact of memory. But when they brought up the pink drink, I was like, I think I remember a pink drink. And I remember it being sweet, not like you would think it would be chalky like medicine, but it was sweet, not like, Pepto or some other medicine they might give you. That's like, it's like chalky or creamy. This was not that. It was, I don't know. I vaguely remember something like that, maybe in the midst of my memory. But that's part of the joy of a conspiracy theory like this, right? Is because it could be true. I mean, I could be like, but it rang some kind of a memory bell, the pink drink thing for me, which I thought was super creepy. But you didn't bring it up, so I'm guessing that was not a thing for you.
Well, did they have a Gifted and Talented program in the first grade?
I don't think I think I was in the Gifted and Talented program for multiple years. And I remember getting called to the library. I think it was more than one grade for me. My initial response is, yeah, I think that was like first. Maybe that wasn't happening in second grade. What grade do you think you were in the Gifted and Talented program?
Well, we kind of rehashed this on the podcast. We were talking about this before. But there was like the great books thing that like our mom did and others some such.
That was definitely third grade for me. I remember that clearly.
And then there was like, I feel like actual Gifted and Talented was the thing we did with Mark Otterson where we'd go and figure out these puzzle things. And then, so I feel like maybe in first grade I was doing the great books, but I don't really think I was in the Gifted and Talented program.
Did you ever, with Mr. Otterson, learn the basics of primitive Mac OS, or the Macintosh operating system?
No.
That was the thing I did with him. That's interesting. Huh.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely remember the swish. That was like a thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think I just don't have any recollection of taking like a pink drink, beyond the fluoride, the rinse thing there.
Well, look, I could be completely wrong because I mean, maybe it's part of the joy of listening to a conspiracy theory podcast is you kind of hold it to be, you kind of think about it. Maybe you kind of kick the tires on this crazy idea. The idea being, of course, that the Gifted and Talented program is a CIA cutout. And so it was just really entertaining. And I was just, I stopped dead in my tracks when they mentioned the pink drink. I was like, that sounds extremely familiar, but also hazy and strange. Like the drink is supposedly something that you would drink and it would, maybe it was part of like these MK Ultra mind control functions that CIA is always involved in, or maybe the drink was about making you forget what they had, maybe you washed out of the system because you weren't a good enough, you didn't pass muster. Maybe that's why they're giving out the pink drink. And so, it'd be like getting the flash from the Men in Black that clears your memory. So of course your memory of the flasher from Men in Black or the pink drink would be hazy and not really all there, vaporous. But anyway, I was really amused. So the reason that we're having to rehash this 2 months later is because I finally got around to listening to that podcast. And the reason I finally got around to listening to it is because it's like, as far as podcast catchers go, like the Duncan Trussell Family Hour is not designated a podcast on YouTube, so you can't get it on the YouTube music side. You can only get it on the YouTube app. Very complex. Like it's a terrible conundrum, the race between Spotify and YouTube Music for the best podcast catcher. Spotify looks better, it's better organized, but it's loaded, plagued with ads. Like you want to listen to the JRE on Spotify, you're going to listen to a lot of extra ads. Whereas on YouTube Music, there's only the ads that Rogan himself inserts into the program. And of course, YouTube Music has the custom RSS feeds, where you cannot have a custom RSS feed on Spotify, which is just so stupid. So what I've done is I've brought in the Duncan Trussell Family Hour and a couple other podcasts that aren't on YouTube Music using RSS feeds, custom RSS feeds. So now I'm back. I got Duncan Trussell now, and so I'm excited that I can now listen to the Duncan Trussell Family Hour on YouTube Music, despite the fact there's a few extra ad breaks inserted by the RSS feed that needs to take its cut somehow. But yeah. But anyway, so I thought I just had to circle around back to that pink drink thing. Absolutely crazy.
All right.
Okay, so I was thinking this week, Brian, about remember that famous copypasta from like the early days of Reddit. I was thinking about this with respect to, well, we'll get to that, but like Tucker Carlson had some man on who was shrieking about the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin, the supposed burial garb of Jesus Christ. Did you happen to listen to this episode, Brian?
No. I did, like Mel Gibson was talking about the Shroud of Turin last time he was on Joe Rogan, though. So I don't know. But yeah, I'm like broadly familiar with the Shroud of Turin. Yeah.
Well, interesting podcast, and you don't have to believe that the Shroud of Turin is real or not real. That's really not interesting. What interests me is the fact that this is the sort of thing that's bubbling up on the internet's biggest TV shows.
Should we explain what a copypasta is?
Yes. Okay. So, like a copypasta, it's like a section of text that's commonly copied and pasted in comment sections across the internet, and so this was some poor douchebag in the early 2010s had gotten excited about the new atheist movement, which we'll hash out a little bit here, but like and they posted this like very condescending, very smug sort of declaration of their atheism to Reddit, and the cringe needle was so far in the red that this particular, couple of it's like one paragraph, this particular declaration of atheism has become a common copied and pasted comment across the internet because the shame is just so shameful. I'll read it to you here. Just to be clear, I'm not a professional quote maker. I'm just an atheist teenager who greatly values his intelligence and scientific fact over any silly fiction book written 3,500 years ago. That being said, I'm open to any and all criticism. In this moment, I am euphoric. Not because of any phony God's blessing, but because I am enlightened by my intelligence. Okay, that's funny. That's extremely funny. But I mean, back in the 2000s, I wasn't a great deal less cringeworthy myself. I never forget the night that the Anaheim Ducks won the Stanley Cup in 2007. Sean Thornton's first cup, as you may recall, Brian.
Right.
But that night is when I discovered Sam Harris on YouTube, and I remember I stayed up all night just soaking in Sam Harris's arguments against religion.
Was it a debate with Rabbi Shmuley?
That came later. This was just, I didn't see that. This was like, it was a series of his just, giving talks, and I was just enchanted by this idea that it was like okay to criticize religion. And obviously that idea, the Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens, and then to a lesser but still significant extent, Dr. Daniel Dennett from was he Harvard? He was Harvard, not MIT. I'm pretty sure Dennett was resident in New Hampshire. Since has passed away. Another one of these interesting thinkers, but especially in the early days of Reddit, 2009, 2010, 2011, atheism was like the thing. And I mean, the atheism subreddit was one of the original big subreddits that there was.
It was on the front page of Reddit.
On the front page, yeah.
A default subreddit.
Yes, default subreddit. That's the ticket. So that's extremely funny. But like now, we've like the situation has evolved from that to public figures undergoing public conversions. I made a short list here of just people who have converted to Christianity in a very public or at least in the case of Joe Rogan, at least acknowledging now going to church as a regular thing that they do, right? So here's the list: Russell Brand, Michaela Peterson, Andrew Huberman, the Dr. Andrew Huberman, the man who does the hormone optimization podcast. Actor Tom Holland, Spider-Man. Ava Vladingerbrook, the Twitter personality and Danish reporter. Is she from Denmark or from the Netherlands? Oh, I think she's from the Netherlands. I think I screwed up there. She's Dutch. Joe Rogan, Niall Ferguson, the Oxford Don man who does, he's got the Scottish brogue, and his wife, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, formerly the big atheist, the woman who was, she was in Africa and suffered some horrible repression as a result of religion, became like a big atheist, would go on Sam Harris's podcast. You remember this, Ayaan Hirsi Ali? Yeah, she's now converted to Catholicism. And then, of course, we've got Mr. Tucker Carlson, inviting the man to breathe breathlessly into the microphone up here in Maine about the Shroud of Turin. So I don't know. To me, I do think that, and I wonder what you think, Brian. I mean, you have mentioned, you had talked about Jesus in less than a derisive fashion somewhat recently on the podcast. I mean, I remember you maybe 6 months ago were saying, talking about Jesus in some serious way, not like a derisive way. Do you think? What do you think is going on here? I obviously have my own theories, but let me let you get in there first.
Well, there was like the old world way of looking at religion, sort of old world, like pre-internet. There was also like the old world way. Speaking of people operating out of like an abundance of caution or whatever, but I mean, people used to like let their kids go out and play, and now you can't do that, and now we're like overproductive and have to wear our masks when we go into the restaurant for the COVID and whatnot, but then take them off to eat and such. Yes. That's the example that keeps on giving with regards to describing COVID mania.
COVID was where my mind goes too, but that does not address the 20 years in between, like the internet, the advent of the internet, and the arrival of COVID, though.
Yeah, well, there was just like the pre-internet way of thinking about religion, which, I mean, I guess was basically having, I'd be playing Pee-wee hockey or something, and we'd be doing wind sprints, and I would make a deal with God that if we could just stop doing wind sprints, I would stop masturbating. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's just like an old idea of God that I think the new atheism movement probably was successful in kind of dispelling the idea of God as like I don't know, that like God is like on the side of the United States or something in this war in the Middle East seemed to be a thing. Although Sam Harris was weird because he kind of, there was a whole, like, the 9/11 kind of, it was like, like, religious fanaticism is, like, a problem, although we were certain in, like, having the U.S. go over there and blow stuff up in the Middle East, which was ultimately, it didn't really affect the terrorist situation I mean, I don't know, well, at least not like Saddam Hussein.
Well, I am very confident that the death of 1 million Iraqi civilians and tens of thousands of U.S. combat personnel in a senseless war in Iraq has only multiplied the number of people who would consider a violent action against the U.S. or its interests versus dwindled that number. So to your point, clearly, the terror wars did not help with the problem of terrorism.
Well, Sam Harris was able to articulate some really good points while also being now we're completely out on Sam Harris. But I mean, I don't know if it really makes sense to believe in faith where you should just believe in something that other people I guess want you to believe in, or you should just kind of believe in God because you should. It seems there's that kind of, that's the old world religious argument maybe that I guess we successfully dispelled. But now we're living in an age where, I don't know, there's going to be some kind of apocalypse in the Middle East, and then there's this whole AI thing and UFOs and whatnot. And I mean, it turns out our government's run by pedos and whatnot. So
that's a red pill moment for sure.
Yeah, so there's this whole war of good against evil sort of makes a lot more sense and whatnot. And then there's a, you have to ascend the I don't know, you have to raise your frequency to not be a low frequency person. Or, I don't know, there's high frequency ideas and low frequency ideas. I don't know, and you're trying to, it's a challenge to better yourself ultimately that you should probably try to pursue, right? So I don't know, those are some ideas about religion.
Yes. It seemed, but do you I would reckon that you would imagine that you've personally gone through some transition of thinking that Sam Harris makes a lot of sense. Let's be clear, Sam Harris's point post 9/11, something that sold him a lot of books, was this idea that religion makes you believe in things uncritically, and when you believe in things uncritically, you can be manipulated. You let down your guard, and you could end up thinking it's a good idea to board an aircraft, hijack it, and crash it into a civilian, a structure like the World Trade, right? Does this sound more or less familiar?
Right.
It's a pretty good representation of what Sam has to say. It is not a terrible point, but the reason you have to zoom out a little bit and realize the reason that the elders in some of these Muslim countries on the other side of the world are convincing their young people to fight in this asymmetric way is because we have visited an asymmetrical war upon them. It's American foreign policy has a lot to do with what motivates people to pressure other people into committing acts of suicide bombing or terrorism. It's just, it's sure it always reminds me of the British complaining about American tactics during the Revolutionary War. We wouldn't line up in the conventional formations. We would shoot from the trees instead. It was considered dishonorable. And that's exactly how we feel about the 9/11 tactics, dishonorable. But so 9/11 definitely happened. That was a thing. And you mentioned COVID. Then we had the big atheist movement. But I don't think it. I think the atheist movement, it didn't exactly start to sunset until the COVID era. Do you think it was the COVID era or before? In COVID, of course, you had a bunch of pronouncements from people who had credibility within the institutions of science make pronouncements that turned out to be wrong. You could just see this lumping in of public health with science, and a lot of people who wear the sort of people who wear white lab coats for credibility made pronouncements that were that turned out to not be true at all. And so I think a lot of people stopped, or a lot of people I think could see that being uncritically loyal to the idea of science isn't any better than any other being uncritically loyal to any other idea, and that science is we wouldn't call it infallible, and that's why you wouldn't want to mix up public health policy with science itself. So science took a serious black eye during COVID, whether rightly or wrongly. But I just feel like this religious this interest in religion, or the sunsetting of the new atheist movement, I feel like it started before COVID. Is that your impression, Brian?
The sunsetting of the atheist movement.
Yeah. Was Sam Harris already on the outs by 2018 and 19?
I don't know. The COVID does play a big role. Yeah, because it's just when you could just no longer trust, just because something was the establishment no longer mattered at all with regards to,
yeah.
I mean, It's like it's racist to say that the disease came from a biolab rather than a wet market for some reason.
Yeah, we're at the point where I reckon if someone's from the establishment now have to question their credibility, you wonder what other motives they might have. I mean, if someone is from one of these, if someone's addressing me from some previously respected institution, that it's like outsiders seem more trustworthy to me at this point. But
like, I mean, there's that debate between like Alex Berenson and Dave Smith that happened somewhat recently, right? Yeah, and Alex Berenson, was saying truths about COVID and got kicked off of Twitter and then sued his way back on because he was saying true things. And then he's calling Dave Smith a Holocaust denier because like the Holocaust Museum says so.
Yeah.
But there's like no real, but that's like the only reason he has to call Dave Smith a Holocaust denier. And so
it's not even, it's Daryl Cooper, right? A third party that the Holocaust Museum has branded with the dirty name Holocaust denier.
Was it Daryl Cooper?
Yes. Yeah. That's even worse than you're saying. It's even more shameful appeal to authority than you're making out.
Well, anyway, yeah, I mean, so it's just crazy that Alex Berenson, it's just crazy that people, he doesn't have like an actual there's not an actual argument there. And so anyway, like atheism is about being like critical. It's not really about the conclusion, right? It turns out like it doesn't really matter if you believe in God or not. Like to be atheist really is to say you should be critical is what it turns out, right? Otherwise you're really putting the cart before the horse and failing in your objective, right? Which is obviously to be critical of the ideas around you. And yeah, I mean, the establishments all around between like Donald Trump and COVID, all these like media forces and the government, they all coalesced to first fight Donnie Trump and then to ram COVID regulations down our throat. And so if you want to say the twilight of atheism started happening in like 2018 or 2019, well, I mean, that's certainly when the establishment started to like overly coalesce, so there was no diversity of opinion between like NPR and the New York Times and everything else. And so, and I don't know, well, that's when the Trump derangement syndrome sure set in on old Sam Harris, I guess.
Yeah. I guess you're right. 2016 is when I turned on Sam Harris. Yeah, that's exactly. I had forgotten about his unfortunate reaction to the 2016 election.
Although I'm completely out on old Donnie Trump now, though. So maybe Sam Harris was right about Donald Trump, or I don't know. Well, there's just no hope. I mean, I don't know. Well, I think Sam Harris would he was like advocating voting for like Kamala Harris. I mean, I just cannot. I cannot stomach these people are the worst. Like, it's just obvious that we don't have any real say, or at least like voting certainly doesn't like have an effect on our political outcomes. Right? We're just doing the same thing we were before. What with these wars in Ukraine and Israel,
that is
in Gaza.
That is a empirically assailable fact. Someone did a study. We'd have to pull it up on the internet. Someone did a study showing that the public's desires and the public's political desires, they measured with the mathematics of statistics the likelihood that the public's political desires would be represented by our governing bodies, and there was no statistical correlation. And then there was a heavy statistical correlation with the political desires of the wealthy elites. So we obviously have a pay-to-play political system. To your point there.
Yeah, but I do think that podcasts are like hugely influential. Although this whole like I don't know, like Putin's meeting with like Donnie Trump in Alaska, maybe as we speak right now, and there has been like some distraction from the whole Epstein issue. So we got to like not let this issue go collectively and continue to try to get to the bottom of it. Although, I mean, I don't know. I guess did you see? I think it's like Netanyahu's plan for like a greater Israel.
Yeah. Yes.
To like expand the borders to like neighboring countries and whatnot. So at least there's lots of things for people to stay angry about with regards to the establishment-y things our establishment likes to do. Yeah. But anyway, to bring it back to atheism, well, yeah, I mean, it does make sense to be critical of things. For some reason, people want you to, I don't know, just believe in God, and it's like just unclear like what that even means.
Well, a couple of points there. If voting for Dems, yeah, it's the worst. I mean, if give me a Bernie or a Zoran Mamdani candidate, then they'll be excited to vote for the Dems again. But like wolves in sheep's clothing ain't going to cut the mustard anymore. And hopefully more and more people will wake up to that fact. And with respect to Netanyahu and Gaza and the greater Israel, I'm wondering if, like, is it just the thing that Westphalian nation states just expand? And that's just the reality of the situation? And you can say whatever you want, but all of our economies expect expansion. And so that ends up eventually being a conflict over natural resources. That eventually inevitably leads to military conflict. And is it the case that Westphalian nation states must always expand? Unless we forget, the massacre at Wounded Knee happened within Hitler's lifetime. So is it like, does America just genocide the Indians and that's our country? And Germany needs Lebensraum, right? Living space. And so they genocide a whole bunch of people in their backyard, Jews and Slavs and other misfits from society. And then now Israel needs to expand, and they have the military power, and they need the Lebensraum, so they're just going to, expand, and that's just what nation states have been doing and will continue to do. And we have to tell ourselves some story to feel better about it, but really, there's something about the structure of these organizations. That's just what I've been thinking about lately with respect to Netanyahu's thing. I really like that you brought up the 2016 election. I hadn't really thought that. I really had I was thinking that COVID might be the real turning point in driving some butts back into church pews. But you're right. There was really a coalescence of authority in response to the 2016 election, because the authorities were recognizing that they were losing control. I'm just repeating what you said a second ago. The authorities were recognizing that they had lost control of the narrative, right? Where we used to be like institutions, like the media is how we understood reality, and people have just abandoned that and moved on to social media and podcasts. It's a very interesting development. But I just wanted to invoke this old story from one of these old TMAC lectures. You might remember this one, Brian, the one where TMAC describes the Roman society as thoroughgoing and modern, right? These were people, the discussion at the dinner table might have been about democracy and atomism. They were close to an industrial revolution, right? Which emperor was it? Was it Tiberius? There's a famous anecdote about a emperor who saw some kind of an automated contrivance to draw water from a well, and they were like, yeah, but we can't have that. We'll put people out of work. Like they were close to they had, just because they had slavery, they didn't have to have an industrial revolution. And then you get the spread of Christianity through the Roman Empire. There's the strange murmurs of a man who had defied the Roman government, had been executed, but then resurrected. Impossible according to the rational minds who administrated the Roman state. It would be the dark-skinned people from the East. He would be whispering about the resurrection of this man. And it would have seemed like so silly. But within a couple generations, within a couple hundred years, you have Christianity becoming the state religion of the Roman Empire. I don't know. And so I'm just wondering, is it possible that a part of this story is that when things get really, really rotten, like obviously the Roman Empire, ethical disaster, right? America in the 21st century, ethical disaster. Maybe when things get intolerable to some degree, people start to recognize, people start to wake up, like the mysterious something, it arouses like whispers of strange stories from the lunatic fringes of society. I don't know, just with the way the UFOs have also propagated in recent years, just makes me wonder if there's not some half-forgotten truth that we all belong to the same human family that we've lost sight of in all of the glitz and glamour of the modern world. And then when you get too far afield, when your ruling class consists of pedophiles blackmailed for control, when the institutions that you trust no longer dispense with the truth, that with just this sense of something starts to tug at the corners of our subconscious. I don't know if does this make any sense at all? Do you think, Brian? Or for me, my distrust of everything started when I had some magic mushrooms and I learned about Jungian archetypes, and I went, oh, the Jungian archetype, that makes complete sense. This understanding of like the Greek pantheon with its like god of war and god of love. Well, that's just one way of thinking about these ideals, these personas that you can that can possess you, or that you can be part of, or interact with, or that have they seem to have some They seem to have some manifestation in society. So I don't know. I think I suspect that there's just something that we've just finally wandered too far afield, and that a lot of this isn't specifically a reaction to COVID necessarily. It's a reaction to something deeper than COVID, and COVID is just a symptom of this dark cancer that's metastasizing at the core of our collective subconscious or something like that.
Well, like the World Economic Forum wants you to like own nothing and be happy, right? And there's just like a way you live your life. I mean, like, if you're like on the social medias and the YouTubes all day, where it just breeds, anxiety and depression, right? So it's just kind of obvious that you have to kind of disengage with all the madness if you're going to be like a happy person. And so, people just have like an intuition that maybe it's better to go to church or something and get some diluted, Eucharist or whatever, rather than go on Reddit or something,
Yeah.
So, and so maybe like, you could say like, in one sense, God has something to do with like the rules to live your life by, so that you're not going to be like miserable. But there's probably more to it than that.
Well, there's just one layer. Like the idea here, when I talk about like the archetypes or Jungian psychology, what I'm really saying is that these ideas are really old to say that they're time tested, right? You get your King James version of the Bible from 1611, and it's among unique. I mean, it's like each part of that book, each part of that piece of literature has competed in a Darwinian competition with other ideas in this, mental realm, this mental arena of competition, and the ideas that have resonated people with through the ages are the ones that end up, they're the ones we end up receiving here at the end of history, from all that process. So I think that it's like it's like a key. It's like this old literature. It's like a key that opens many locks. It's hyper true, something like a document like the Bible. Whereas a biography of like JFK is specific to just one person. So that's a biography about JFK is literally true, but a story that's true in all of our lives simultaneously. It's not going to be literal. It's going to be symbolic or something like that, archetypical. But it's like a single key that opens many locks, whereas the biography of JFK, you've got a 1-to-1 lock to key ratio there. So you just got to recognizing that, I think, was the big step forward for me. I think a lot of people have come to that realization, and I'm just wondering if there's anyone outside the prison tunneling in as we're tunneling out. That's what I'm fundamentally wondering here, and that is a big theme in Plato's Republic. The allegory of the cave. It's implied that that something is guiding the pilgrim out of the cave and towards the divine light. That the idea would be to design a state that does that. It was Plato's Republic. But that's interesting. And a lot has happened, and it's just really interesting for me to hear this man on Tucker proclaiming that the Shroud of Turin is authentic. When 15 years ago we were all ecstatic in our atheism, like that poor soul who wrote up that copypasta on Reddit all those years ago. I wonder if that person's aware of their fame. I hope they are.
Well, so are you like coming around to the virgin birth then, or what?
No, I don't. Well, so are you asking me if I believe the virgin birth happened in a literal sense, in a JFK's biography sense? That doesn't even seem relevant to the question. I would strongly doubt it, right? But that doesn't really matter so much. The question of, did this archetypical story ever have an exact version, an exact analog in our it doesn't really seem like the right question to even be asking with respect to religion. I mean, it's like, does that make sense? Like the story of the virgin birth is hyper true. I'm sure it's not literally true.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't think anyone was literally born of a virgin, and I don't think that Jesus came back from the dead. And Jesus might not even be a singular person, but probably that Shroud of Turin was put over somebody's body. Is there something about the Shroud of Turin that like proves the resurrection or something?
Well, a couple odd things about the Shroud of Turin. It's a linen burial shroud, meaning it's a cloth made from the plant, the flax plant, right? That's what linen is. and you would wrap it around your body once or twice and store it in a tomb. That's how they did some burials back in the arid days, I guess. And there's a lot of these shrouds, but because they preserve well in the desert. So in Israel, there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these in museums. They're just burial shrouds. The body decays, but the burial shroud remains. So the burial shroud's not uncommon. Well, this particular shroud has an image of a crucified man with very realistic-looking injuries that are consistent with the crucifixion. And it's like lasered onto the flax as a very, very thin image, right? It's not painted, right? It's not printed. It's microns thin, like it's as if the image was like, branded there or something like that. But it's not burnt. We cannot recreate this with modern methods. Impossible. And so
the image of Jesus radiated onto the Shroud of Turin somehow.
The man on Tucker Carlson's pod had some very interesting energy measurements about that. That didn't. I mean, I don't know if they are plausible or not.
So there's not other shrouds that looks just like this. Then is what you're.
There's a lot of burial shrouds from a lot of people that died. We have this one burial shroud that's claimed to be that of Christ.
But there aren't other shrouds that look the same way though.
Yeah, there's shrouds. Most shrouds do not have a body image burnt on them. They might have a little leftover blood, or something like that. They might have, but they don't have like a printed image on there.
Well, I think I don't think it's implausible that if you were a master of time and space and your chi and whatnot. Maybe something could happen like that when you die. As a separate question, the resurrection still seems pretty unlikely. But if you were a master of your body and mind, something sensational could maybe happen, like the release of chi or something. Man, I could buy
like Palpatine when he goes down the reactor shaft, or
exactly.
Release of energy. Yeah, I don't know. I did not know what to make of the podcast, but I was just like, so this is what passes for discourse these days. Interesting juxtaposition with 2011 when our friend the atheist was on there, typing up this little manifesto.
We've come a long way, huh?
Yeah, we sure have. All right. Well, do you want to take a quick break, Brian? And then when we come back, we'll talk about the Feminine Trinity.
Sure.
Alrighty. And we're back. Okay, well, Brian, speaking of the landscape of the collective unconscious, so the Jungian collective unconscious, here's something I was thinking about recently. The Feminine Trinity, which is something I think about frequently, but the ubiquity of the Feminine Trinity is really remarkable. I don't know if we've quite hammered it all the way home here in the podcast. If not, let me correct that wrong right now. So obviously there's Demeter, Persephone, and Hecate, right? The virgin or maiden, the mother, and the crone, the classic feminine archetype that modern occultism reflects to this day, right? So we know about that one. But then there's these other groups of three women from Greek mythology: the three Fates, the three Furies, the three Gorgons. Remember Medusa? She's one of these three Gorgons. And the three Graces. Yeah. And then the Vikings had the three Norns. You might remember them from the Assassin's Creed Valhalla game if you played it. But there's the three. And also from what's that Ragnar Lothbrok? Whatever the Vikings show was. I think it was called Vikings. It was somewhat popular last decade, featuring the semi-mythical Ragnar Lothbrok. Well, the Norns, the Norns also appear in that show. They're obviously related to Greek mythology. The three supernatural beings who weave everyone's fate. The Norns, we'll come back and talk about the Norns in a second here. There's another interesting thing about one of their names, but there's Botticelli featured the three Graces in his famous Primavera that hangs in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence to this day. Shakespeare had the three weird sisters from Macbeth. Remember these crazy weird sisters, Brian? The three witches who figure into the plot of Macbeth by touching off a curse in the beginning, William Blake, a couple centuries after Shakespeare, painted Hecate as this triune goddess with three faces. And so that's all consistent with Western culture, but here's the part that really gets me. Other cultures have these feminine trinities also. Like, for example, in Hinduism, there's the feminine trinity of Saraswati, Lakshmi, and Parvati. Parvati, I remember her from Harry Potter.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Parvati herself is as a triune god. Her other aspects are Durga and the goddess of destruction, Kali, from the Kali Yuga. And then the thing that really interests me is the three sisters from the Americas, right? When the Europeans landed here, landed in the Americas, in the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries, they discovered that the inhabitants here, in order to avoid the disasters of monocrop agriculture, which brought us such joys as the Dust Bowl, instead of planting the same crop in the soil all the time, you want to rotate your crops to maintain nitrogen level in the soil, right? And the way that was done here in North and I don't know about South America, but here in the Americas was by rotating corn, beans, and squash, right? And these were called the Three Sisters. So you have another one of these weird, triune, conceptions of the feminine, the goddess. Very interesting, and it makes you wonder if there is a broader mythological or archetypical framework that's native to the human mind that can transcend the gaps of the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, to where you're going to have triune goddesses in India and North America and Greece and Europe all at the same time. Is very interesting. It's a strangely recurring archetypical motif across cultures. And I was just thinking about the Three Sisters, the corn, beans, and squash, and thinking about how odd that was that it matches up with a mythology from ancient Greece, for example. Or Christian mythology, which famously the Christians, they had to assassinate the Hecate, the old woman. They wanted people taking the watered-down Eucharist you mentioned in the first half, right? They didn't want people finding enlightenment by eating mushrooms found in the woods, who wise old ladies know where to find them, right? That is a competition. In order to establish a monopoly, we have to demonize the classic third leg of the Feminine Trinity by making the old woman out to be this consort of the devil. Right, you got to watch out. And that later had horrific repercussions during the Inquisitions. Right, you get the witch burnings of the late Middle Ages in Europe. Interesting that's the late Middle. It's Jerry Brown and his wife, whose name I now forget. It's also a J. It could be Judy or something. They wrote this book about Christian iconography, and according to them, the Catholic Church didn't even pretend the ministry of Jesus wasn't about mushrooms until about the time of the Inquisition. They point to all this medieval artwork where Jesus is explicitly rendered as a mushroom. So anyway, it's just interesting to me that you have all of this mythological or archetypical linkage across cultures, across oceans. It really makes you wonder about the same frontiers of the subconscious that I hypothesized in the first half of the show were calling everyone back to the church to sit in the pews and hear about fire and brimstone versus listening to the new atheists like Sam Harris. But anyway, that was an interesting one. A final note on the Nerns, right? One of the there's three of them. One of them represents the past, one the present, and one the future. These Nerns, these are the ones I mentioned. The weavers of fate from Norse mythology. I found out that the one their names are Uror, Burandi, and Skuld, and that means fate, becoming, and debt, and they represent the past, present, and future. And I was really interesting that it was really obviously we understand that the old Norse and old German are related languages. A lot of German words and Norse words, there's a lot of cross pollination between German and Norse. So it reminded me of the German word Schuld, which means debt or fault. If you bump into someone in Germany, you might say Entschuldigung instead of saying excuse me, and that kind of means faultness. Literally translate to faultness. My fault, maybe something like that. But it's also what they call a financial debt is also a Schuld. Right? It's a responsibility. And the ubiquity, the idea that the words debt and sin are related in Indo-European languages was one of the points perennially made by Dr. Michael Hudson, who points out that translating the Bible. Translating the Bible, you could use the word debt or sin for a lot of the words that get translated from the Greek into Vulgate languages like English, and it's just it really goes to show, it really illustrates St. Augustine's transformation of Christianity in the 5th century, changing the forgiveness preached by Jesus from one of massive debt forgiveness to one of forgiveness for personal moral failings, like too much time in the P-Hub. Well, now you've got to make your penance with God, and that turns into a way to extract money from the poor, versus a debt forgiveness, which just means that that's a wealth transfer from rich to poor. Instead, you can have people either take the aforementioned watered down Eucharist, or pay some money to get themselves out of purgatory, right? So it becomes what was a transfer of wealth from poor to rich becomes. From rich to poor becomes a classic transfer of wealth from poor to rich, thanks to St. Augustine's reimagining of the Christian message. And so it's interesting to me that the Nern, who represents the future, the weaver of the future, has the same name, Skuld or Schuld, meaning debt or sin. Very interesting stuff there.
Well, I think trinities are pretty ubiquitous. I mean, everyone loves a good movie trilogy. And I don't know, there's birth, life, and death, and elements have their 3 forms and whatnot. So I guess it makes sense that Native Americans would have their trinity, their squash trinity. I think what's interesting about it all is just the brutal suppression necessary to modulate the subservient peoples into the shape that they need, and so, I mean, I can only imagine the effect that burning the witches has on the psyche, and so that people are scared to listen to the crone or whatever, and so that's probably the more interesting part in my estimation. But yeah, crazy trinities, man, it's a thing for sure.
In Dan Carlin's famous podcast, Painfotainment, talking about the witch trials and the public torture of heretics during the late Middle Ages, he always makes sort of mention that some of these people who were being broken on the wheel were themselves convinced that this was a great thing, that was their salvation, and were delighted to take part in it, even though they had to suffer horrible pain. Absolutely wild. And with respect to trinities, I think the reason that trinities pop up so often, when I think Trinity, I think Super Mario Brothers 64, the N64 game. Remember this thing?
Who could forget?
Yeah, there's this moment in the beginning of that game. The conceit in Mario 64 is that you're Mario. It's me, I'm Mario, and the camera chases Mario. Right, you look at Mario's butt most of the game because you're playing as Mario, right? So you're imagining that you're inhabiting this character, right? And the further conceit revealed in the early going of the game is that there's a fish in Lakitu who sits on a cloud. This is from the Mario Brothers game from 1985. There was this monster that would sit on a cloud and throw shells at Mario. And so the conceit is that there's one of these guys who's got a fishing rod and he's got a camera attached to it and he's following Mario around. But there's an odd moment where the camera shows the fish in Lakitu, right? The game is trying to explain to you what's happening. It's making up a story about why there's a camera following me everywhere. And the camera zooms out and shows Mario talking to this fish in Lakitu. So now the cameraman with camera in full view is talking to Mario, and your immediate thought is, well, hang on, if now the camera is in the camera view, well, now who's recording, right? So I think that any sense of reality has to have a subject, an object, and then an observer who, so I think that the 3 legs of the triangle. You can think of the Mario, the character you think you are, right? Then there's the fish in Lakitu, but then there's a world, there's an existence that this duality exists with a context that exists within. That's the 3rd leg of the triangle. And so when I think Trinity, I think Super Mario Bros. 64.
Well, Mario 64, it is funny because it's just the first 3D game, right?
Yeah.
And so, Lakitu is this means by which to help someone who's only ever played 2D Mario Brothers to sort of understand the camera function.
Yeah.
And I guess you need guides like that when exploring a new dimension. And that sounds like it relates to what we're doing. We're sort of exploring a new dimension somehow.
Yeah.
We're trying to get in touch with our guide or whatever. I don't know what to make of the bit where Lakitu, all of a sudden you see Lakitu and Mario, and it begs the question of who's observing. But, yeah, man, I don't know. Trinities are definitely a ubiquitous part of the human experience.
I'm sure the Trinity goes back to ancient Egyptian magic, where you've got, Ra, Isis, and Horus, the old Trinity there. But it also pops up in alchemy. Trinitarianism, I think, really was popularized by the Neoplatonists in the 2nd and 3rd century. These Neoplatonists, they rose in response to the rise of Gnosticism. Right, the Gnostics, some Gnostics were Christians, others were Jewish, but the point, some were, believed in the Hellenic gods. But the point of the Gnostics is they believed we were in some horrible trap, like a matrix, right? They believed we were stuck in some horrible reality. And the Neoplatonists said, no, we may be stuck in this reality, but the person who created it, the character that created it, is actually good. We promise. It's not some evil demiurge, right? That's what the Gnostics called it. The demiurge comes from Plato's book Timaeus. This is Plato, But so the Gnostics conceive of this evil reality. The Neoplatonists say, no, it's not evil. There is a benevolent God here, behind it all, not an evil one. And you can see where Augustine was a Neoplatonist before he was a Christian, and as Will and Ariel Durant write in their book, Caesar and Christ, he did not cease being a Platonist once he became a Christian. But this idea of the Trinity comes out of Neoplatonism. I forget it's like the source, the nothing, the nous, or something that it all arises out of. I think that's right. But so the Trinity, the Trinity arrives in Christianity via Neoplatonism, and the related discipline of Hermeticism, which gave rise to alchemy, also has that same Trinity built in. And the last note on the Trinity here was that it was a huge big deal in the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, whether or not you accepted that Christ was triune, right? This is what the Arian heresy was all about. And whether you or not accepted Christ was triune, or if he just existed as a single individual. For those who are familiar with Greek philosophy and Plato, right, the idea that Christ was triune was very easy to assimilate. But for the Germans in Europe, they were confused by this idea and didn't understand it, and so Bishop Athanasius versus Bishop Arius was the big political conflict of the late Roman Empire. And lest we forget, in those days, your religion was kind of your loyalty, was kind of the proxy. It was the state religion. There wasn't any separation between church and state or religion and state. So whether you believed in Nicene Christianity, which is this type of Christianity that won the day, that became the state religion, that we accepted the Trinity. And the types of Christianity that don't contain a Trinity fell by the wayside. So you'll still recite the Nicene Creed in Episcopalian or Catholic services. This idea that we affirm the Trinity version of Christ. So anyway, lots of stuff on the Trinity there, Brian. Very interesting how it pervades history. The Trinity is no small thing in either philosophy, religion, or history. I mean, it's a titanic thing. So I thought a lot about the Trinity this week.
All right. Well, speaking of this, we've had 3 parts to this podcast.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, let's see. What do we talked about the Duncan Trussell Family Hour. We moved on to the rise and fall of atheism, and now we're talking about the Feminine Trinity. Well, Brian, you're exactly right. The number 3 pops up once again.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're coming up on the hour mark here, Brian, so I think that what we'll do is we'll stow the rest of our topics for the next time, and we'll go ahead and call it a wrap for today. What do you say?
It sounds good.
All right. Well, folks, thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, be sure to point your browser window to systemfailure.org. There you can read the weekly essays on these topics written by yours truly, and if you are so inclined, you can even enter your email address to receive those emails weekly on Sunday morning in your email inbox. That way you never have to worry about missing one. Furthermore, if you'd like to get in touch with either Brian or myself, you can accomplish that feat over on the About page by clicking on the name of the appropriate person. Alrighty, folks. Well, that does it for another edition of the System Failure Podcast. We hope you have a fantastic week.
All right, see ya.